welcome to Harry Cole Saves the West, the show where American grit meets British backbone. British PM Keir Starmer didn't just win big last year, he won a political mega jackpot. A majority so enormous you could grout the tiles of 10 Downing Street with Labour MPs. The man had more control over any Prime Minister in decades. And how long did this so-called grown-up government last before falling apart? Just months. Britain is in a slump. It's in a crater. 0% growth, and literally nobody, according to the latest polling, nobody thinks the economy is in very good shape. Food prices continue to rise. Bills are up. Families are squeezed. And Starmer's big idea? A budget that economists warn will clobber the very people who voted for him. And now we have the pleasure of a Labour civil war playing out live on the airwaves and live on stage. Andy Burnham, the King of Manchester, hero of the Labour left, is circling like a heavyweight before the bell. MPs are starting to whisper Starmer's weak, he's wobbling, and can Burnham take him out? And if Andy Burnham did take over, Labour doesn't just drift left, it swerves off of a cliff. More spending, more state intervention at the exact moment Britain needs stability, not left-wing experiments. So tonight we ask, how did they blow it so badly? And what does the government do to recover from a freefall quite so fast? And who are Starmer's successors? Britain is spiralling, and meanwhile the White House looks on slightly baffled about who they're going to be dealing with. Joining me from London is a man who has seen Keir Starmer up close, former political director to Keir Starmer, Luke Sullivan. Luke, you left Keir Starmer's side. Oh. We're not. I don't think we've got Luke, but we do have Freddie Hayward in the studio. New Statesman, Freddie Hayward. Freddie, from where I sit, where we sit, 4,000 miles away, looking back at Britain, looking back at this government, it does seem remarkable that they managed to blow it so quickly after having so much potential. What went wrong?
Well, they didn't really have a coherent plan. I mean, they said they did before the general election, and then they've had to change those plans both on the economy and migration. We've seen that this week. And remember, Keir Starmer would talk about smashing the gangs during the campaign. That has changed dramatically with Shabana Mahmood's proposals this week. On the economy, they said in their manifesto that they weren't going to raise taxes. Now, Rachel Reeves, it looks like he's going to have to raise taxes in some form. It seemed to me at the time that Labour weren't really grappling with the reality as it is. They weren't pressured to provide enough detail, and the Tories were so bad that there wasn't much competition.
Yeah. Freddie, stay there. I think we can talk to Luke Sullivan, former Keir Starmer's former political director. Luke, are you there?
I am. Thank you for having me.
No, thanks for coming. Listen, I can't help but think that, you know, when you didn't go into government with Labour, you departed your old role in July last year. Everything seems to have gone a bit wrong since you left. What have they done?
Yeah, look, thank you for having me. I think it has been a difficult 15 months, and I think the Prime Minister, when he's reflected and spoken about it, has accepted it's been a difficult 15 months. I have a slightly different view. I was always of the sense that it was going to be difficult, that the state of the country was such that the inheritance was so bad, and frankly, the British public were so fed up with politics and politicians and, you know, frankly, the rolling series of crises that the country had faced. And I think it was always going to be difficult. And yes, they're 15 months in, but I think they have got some things in their favour. They're still 3.5 years away from a general election. And frankly, it's in the hands of the Prime Minister and his cabinet and the Labour Party to fix it and sort the problems out.
I mean, the Prime Minister has historic, lows in the polls. You know, he's the least popular Prime Minister since polling was invented. I mean, how do you come back from that? Is it not that the public seem to have made up their mind when the only card they really seem to have to play is saying, oh, if you get rid of Keir Starmer, there'd be a bond crisis. If you get rid of Keir Starmer, we'd have to have an election. I'm old enough to remember sort of Theresa May's team making those sort of threats in the dying days of her administration. Those are desperate cards to play. And to play them with a majority of, in the triple-digit majority within 15 months of being elected, it strikes me, it looks like it's sort of hold below the waterline.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I thought the intervention last week was pretty extraordinary. I don't think it was a useful or sensible thing for Number 10 to do. And I think you're right. I think these aren't the usual steps you would take. I think what they do show is a sense that number 10, that the Prime Minister does get the sense of the scale of the challenge and the problems. And, when I speak to ex-colleagues in number 10, they do understand how difficult the political position is. And I think, whether or not it was a good idea, and my personal view was it wasn't, they do get the challenge that they face.
But I mean, the problem is how did they get to this stage so quickly? Is what I think what I'm just trying to ascertain. This isn't just, midterm blues, and a bit of a wobble, and the sunlit uplands are there eventually for Labour to seize. It's almost as if they didn't survive contact at all with the, as soon as they crossed the threshold of Downing Street, and have been struggling to get that recover ever since. And I think, if you look back at some of those early decisions that were made, whacking up winter fuel, taking away, winter fuel payments from pensioners, a block of voters that are pretty vocal, pretty well organised at writing very good letters to newspapers and the like. And then this sort of dancing on the head of a pin over whether it was breaking the manifesto to hike national insurance at the last budget, and Rachel Reeves saying, that 40 billion worth of tax hikes of the last budget she'd never want to do ever again. And look, here we are back having the same debate about whether a similar scale is needed. Once that trust has gone with voters, is it possible to get it back?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think what I would say is there's a great Mike Tyson quote, which was, everyone's got a plan until they're punched in the face. And I think probably if you were to be fair to this government, I think I think if you were to sort of speak to them, I think it's clear they didn't necessarily have a plan, that there was teething problems upon coming into government. And I think what we do and what we have seen is that we've seen this week what can be done when a big political argument is made. And I think it's fair to say Shabana Mahmood and the Labour government have probably had one of the better weeks than they've had for quite some time. And that's because they've come out with a well-reasoned, well-argumented policy with some big politics that has rather bamboozled some of their political opponents on the right. And I do think it shows that it is possible to change public opinion. Now, we haven't really seen big polls since this, and I don't think we should expect to see movement straight away. But what I do think is we are in an age now where the public are much more consumers of politics. They aren't necessarily party political in the same way that people were tied to party politics in a way before. They're much more consumers. I do think that where politicians make arguments and they show that they're delivering, or they have have big ideas and go out and argue for it, that they can change public opinion. And I think that's one of the big things this government's going to have to do. Shabana, I think, has led the way this week. I think other people have to do that. We've clearly got what is the biggest budget of my political lifetime. I would have thought you probably think the same in terms of the political and economic significance. It is, I don't think you can overstate how big the political moment is next week, and that's Rachel's opportunity to set out her plan for the country and trying to put the country on a longer term trajectory to growth, but also what matters to readers of the Sun, which is, are they feeling better off in their pockets?
I mean, you say to me, there are people making the weather and making movements. The new Home Secretary, as you say, Shabana Mahmood, there, obviously taking a tough line, bamboozling, as you so well put it, political opponents on the right and actually on the left, I would argue as well. But none of this seems to be coming from the centre. None of this seems to be coming from Keir Starmer. Now, you know what people say about Keir Starmer. You would have heard the whispers in the bars and the corridors of power over the years that he is a technocratic, kind of bland, kind of steady as she goes politician, lawyer really more than a politician. And then there was a brief moment where you tried to use that to his advantage. This, after the chaos of Boris and Liz Truss and Rishi and COVID and Brexit, actually what the public needed was a sort of a technocratic manager. I think the front page of the Sun said that very word, time for a new manager. Is that the problem, though, that actually, almost sort of Wizard of Oz style, once you strip away the curtain, there isn't that raw politics there. There isn't that sort of Starmerism. There isn't a driving force behind him. And this is what happens when you're in power without a sort of a guiding motive that is driving you. And actually, while people think they want sort of management and calmness, actually they do want a bit of passion as well. It feels very passionate-less. Number 10.
Yeah, look, I understand the criticism, and I understand the sort of caricature of Keir and how he does politics. I don't think that is the Keir Starmer that I know. I think he is unusual in a politician, that he's quite happy to let his team be the sort of the lead and the star players on issues. I think he's much more of somebody who does his politics and thinks of governing as a job. And he's much more interested in, are people delivering on the areas that they're meant to be delivering on, rather than, the tittle tattle. And I think it was one of those, to go back to the briefings of last week, which was sort of struck me, was that isn't how Keir does his politics. It's not how he engages with things.
You never saw him go studs up a brief against some colleagues. I mean, he was letting his views be known about his uncomfortableness with Jeremy Corbyn over the years on a number of issues, wasn't he?
Yeah, look, I think one of the things I always respect of Keir is that he will say things in private. And he thinks there are forums for how to deliver messages, and I think that was one of the things I thought was odd last week. If there were colleagues that Number 10 thought weren't behaving properly, the right way to do that's not to brief newspapers and the media. It's to have that conversation with those individuals one-on-one, and I think that's a much better way of doing those conversations. But look, fundamentally, I think with Keir, what I think he has done well over these first 15 months is he has established himself on the international stage at a time when I think that was really important for the country. I think he needs to have found a way of taking the things that he's done well internationally. He's obviously talked about focusing domestically on some big domestic issues. He's made some changes in September. I think it will take some time to bed through. But I think there's also a thing with Keir, which is fundamentally, he thinks he's the right person to lead the country and to lead the Labour Party, and he will carry on with the right, as long as he thinks the strategy is the right one, he will carry on and take a longer term view. And I think one of the things that people really underestimate about Keir is just how determined he is. How
isn't it the fact that it's better the devil you know, and frankly, vast parts of the Labour Party and actually probably vast parts of the opposition, vast parts of the public think, okay, this guy's a bit of a dud, but the alternatives don't really bear thinking about. Your Andy Burnhams, your Angela Rayner's, your Louise Haig's. He's a bulwark. He has always been a bulwark against the sort of crazier, softer and even harder left parts of the Labour Party. And actually, there was a great line by Janan Ganesh in the FT the other day about Reeves and Starmer, which is they're kind of duty bound to resign, having cocked it all up so badly. But please God, don't let them do that. Isn't it? It's not that he's resolute. It's the fact is that it's the alternative is far worse.
Well, look, there isn't a vacancy, and I read the piece, and it's as you would expect, is very well written, very well argued. But I think one of the things that was interesting, if 15 months in, if you've gone to the point of these sorts of briefings, I thought one of the points I thought they did miss, and I think is underappreciated, was under the Conservatives this sense of chopping and changing leader. And I do think one of the big strengths that the Labour Party and Keir had when he went to the country was making this position about essentially saying politics should tread
lightly on more people's lives.
Tread much more lightly on people's lives. And I do think that is something the British people on the whole, want to elect their leaders and then let them get on and do the job. And
we can argue about treading lightly on people's lives. How about the milkshake tax or the increased taxes?
We haven't seen the budget yet, Harry.
The banning of vapes, banning of refills of Coca-Cola in Nando's because there's too much sugar in it. How's that treading lightly on people's lives? Come on.
Well, I think a number of those were conservative policies in which there was
Some continuity.
a level of cross-party
Look,
consensus.
I'm going to let you go. I just wanted to ask you about it's a similar debate that's being had in the US. We're looking at this sort of what the US can learn from Britain, what Britain can learn from the US on this show. That's kind of our mantra. The Democrats are having this same argument of actually, do you tilt to the left? Do you go down the Mamdani route, or do you try to, but how's that going to land in rural America? I mean, looking at the polls in the UK, the Greens are on the march. The Liberals have still got a pretty significant. The Gaza independents, as they're so beautifully and euphemistically put, are eating into Labour's vote. It's clear that there needs to be some form of tilt to the left if Starmer is going to be able to, stay in power without the sort of left-wing vote fracturing. Do you think he does that, or does the sort of Morgan McSweeney strategist, the Labour right, keep him in the middle of the road and actually say, look, you might feel better in the warm bath of leftism, but the rest of the country are going to look at it and think it's mental?
Look, I think fundamentally, elections are won in the centre ground, and I think the idea that the Labour Party went off onto the left would be a mistake. I understand it may make certain people feel better, but I don't believe that's the electoral strategy that's going to win. And I think in the same way in America, Mamdani may well get elected in New York. I suspect he wouldn't get elected in other parts of the United States. And I think the same is the same in the UK in terms of the politics.
All right, Luke Sullivan, former advisor to Keir Starmer, no doubt waiting by the phone for that call-up back to come back and put out the bin fire that the Labour Party has turned into since you left. It's all your fault.
I've had a lovely 15 months. It's been great.
If you'd stayed, it would have all been okay. Thanks for joining us. Come back and see us soon.
Thank you.
Right, still with us in the studio is Freddie Hayward, the US correspondent for the New Statesman, which is fair to say is a left-of-centre publication in the United Kingdom for our American friends, and Sarah Selip, Republican strategist, appeared out of nowhere during that interview. Welcome back to the show. Freddie, I'm going to start with you. I mean, a bit of topspin there from a Labour Party life. Everything's going to be okay. It does strike me that that stat that Keir Starmer is more least popular Prime Minister since polling was invented. Less popular than Liz Truss. Less popular than Boris Johnson the day he was hauled, kicking and screaming out of number 10. It would be a sort of almost Donald Trump-like Lazarus resurgence to pull this one out. And you know what? I've met Donald Trump. Keir Starmer ain't no Donald Trump.
No, I think what Keir needs to learn is that it's more risky to be less radical.
Hang on, slow down. More risky to be
less radical.
Okay,
the safer political option nowadays is to be more radical.
Pull
that's
the pin.
what Trump shows, that's what Mamdani shows, and I think that's what Labour have seen this week with the immigration reforms. We've also seen, Harry, you must note, that Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, said to the police chiefs that they need to stop arresting people for legal speech on Twitter, which I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear.
Indeed, 12,000 people.
They should do something similar with the pro-Palestinian protesters. I'm sure you'd agree, because free speech needs to be
free speech, for sure. I mean, the guy did have a hammer, and he did hit a female couple with a hammer, but we can argue that one.
But they need to be taking these positions where they set out a moral position, they say this is why we believe in what we believe, and they go out there and they argue for it, rather than just being buffeted by events as we've seen for 15 months now.
This is exactly the point I was trying to get Luke to bite on, but he wasn't really there, which is that, the problem with an empty vessel is people fill it with their own ideas. People try to paint Keir Starmer as something they want it to be. The Blairites think he can be a new Blairite. The soft left think he's one of theirs. The Human Rights Brigade think he's one of theirs. And the problem is that there isn't any driving force of Starmerism. And until, isn't that the problem? That actually he is just a sort of slightly hollow suit.
Right, yeah, it's no longer the noughties. You can't be a Blairite because we live in a different age. So he needs to be he needs to be something else. I mean, the big question with the budget coming up is Rachel Reeves going to stick with the orthodoxy of the past 20 years, or is she going to adopt a more radical approach? I mean, tinkering around with income tax is not going to fundamentally change the economic situation in the UK. What we really need is a radical reform of our entire tax code. She needs to be looking at things that go beyond the Westminster debate about budgets.
Sarah, that's exactly the point, isn't it? If you advise politicians, you're a strategist, you're an electoral sort of keen watcher of these things, tinkering doesn't work. What would Donald Trump do in this situation? Keir Starmer, the least popular Prime Minister in history, Donald Trump's, had his woes. They tried to jail him. They nearly succeeded. He was down and out. He was down to a handful of supporters that would publicly back him in 2022-ish. What would you be advising such a dire politician and dire political situation? How do you get out of it without, just throwing your hands up and saying, "Sod this for a laugh"?
Well, the problem is here, you have to be unapologetically yourself. You can't be a Trump and go out as a Mamdani. You can't be a J.B. Pritzker and masquerade as a Joe Biden. It just does not make sense. So that being said, in this situation, just speak to your own and then have your delegates, in our case, the RNC Youth Council, GOP, just get out the troops. Make sure that they're also helping with the messaging, because even though the buck stops with the president, the staffers, the undersecretaries, they are the neck that turns the head.
Donald Trump's not having a great week. There was a Fox poll out yesterday that showed his unpopularity is on the march. We've talked at length about the MAGA splits. We'll talk about them again a little bit later as well. It seems that sort of all. J.D. Vance was giving a speech at Breitbart this morning. We talked about patience. Everyone needs patience. It strikes me that we live in a world that the voters, and I'm not saying it's the voters' fault, but the public are just fed up of waiting for promises, waiting for jam tomorrow, waiting for the great shining city of the hill to be revealed. And this Labour government has fallen apart pretty spectacular in 15 months. But is the speed of our politics now so insatiable for news and results and quickness that actually no one can really govern in this scenario? Exactly. You've got the Vice President begging people to just wait, just calm down, the results are coming. But voters don't think like that anymore, do they?
I think that if you use America as an example, look at what was going on in Twitter in 2016. We had at one point 18% of the 18 seconds until a new tweet emerged. Now it's every millisecond.
Yeah, it's just doom scroll, doom scroll, doom scroll.
We do the exact same thing now. But when it comes to social media, you can pay to remove the ads. You're not turning on prime time and seeing the right messaging. You're seeing all of these different cycles, these different voices. And you're doing the same thing on your timeline, but when you have Democrats weaponizing the ad buys and the big donors to make sure they're seen no matter what you do or how much you pay, we have the TikTok generation.
Well, it's the sort of speed of it, Freddie, isn't it? Like, back in the day, it used to be the stories would last a week or a day, and you'd have the traditional broadcast outlets, you'd have the Sunday shows. The similarities are very clear. You'd have a politician writing an op-ed. It would then be debated on a Sunday show. Yeah. It would then sort of bring that. Now it's literally like we're doing six stories a day. Is Britain and to some degree America ungovernable in that way? Is it a structural problem? Rishi Sunak had these same problems. Boris Johnson had these same problems. Boris Johnson had an equally big majority. He got into power, was pulling levers, they weren't moving. Same things happened with Labour. Nigel Farage, for all we know, if the election was held tomorrow in the United Kingdom, would win a big majority. But he's going to hit exactly the same roadblocks as Starmer has.
I don't think it's the roadblocks, it's about what you try and do in office. Donald Trump was elected largely on a working class coalition and hasn't yet done much for the working class. I mean, the big beautiful bill, there wasn't much there. There was some token measures on tips and some other small tax
they'd argue the
changes.
tax cuts will take some time to be
well,
felt.
but then so will tariffs, and that will also come through and affect people's ability to afford groceries. In the UK, you can see the exact same thing. It's not that people are just lack attention span or they can't focus on what they want. They know what they want. It's just that politicians aren't delivering it. So it's a question of delivery, I think, rather than the media.
However, your magazine is a sort of in-house, almost not in-house, that doesn't do justice, but it is the sort of periodical of the Labour Party movement. It is. But it's made some changes as well, isn't it? I think a new editor and a new direction. It is kind of more sort of blue Labour on that working class, traditional Labour, old Labour vote. Where are they going? Where is that bloc going? Because it feels to me that if Labour shift to the left and they get on the progressive train and they get the blue-haired, brigade on board and keep them there, and they get the Greens on board, you're going to lose that, vast parts of the northern former industrial parts of Labour, where Labour did very well, actually won back those seats that Boris Johnson took off of them. It does feel like it's a real kind of existential moment for the future of the Labour Party, in the same way there is a little bit for the Democrats here. Where's the New Statesman sort of chart? Where do you think it's going to go?
Well, the New Statesman's very broad, and we have lots of.
But you're a broad coalition.
Lots of different perspectives. But I mean, on this question of what would Blue Labour do, this is a broad movement within the Labour Party that is essentially socially conservative. It's not really, but that's how people frame it. And then economically on the left, they need to push forward on this week and see some of the victories that they've had. But they also need to make the argument that the centre in politics has changed. There's no way in which we can just say, well, the centre is Tony Blair, because that's not true anymore. The centre's shifted. Donald Trump has shown that. I think
exactly.
Mamdani's shown that. And that's what the Labour Party needs to recognise. And that's why the budget is so important, to match these reforms in immigration with some economic policies that actually help the working people of Britain.
So what do you reckon Donald Trump's sitting there looking at the most? This is a guy that views the world through TV ratings and popularity. They must be looking at Britain and thinking, Christ, this is a bit of a basket case, right?
Look at what's going on with our sanctuary cities around the country, right? Someone told me that they should be called cities of rebellion. I mean, it's pretty true. So, I mean...
The same problems are being felt here, whether it's, you do have a stronger central government.
Exactly. I mean, if you look at what's going on with the Blue-Haired Brigade here, everything else in the world kind of makes sense. We just want to get them back on track.
All right, guys, don't get away. We're going to talk about Mamdani even more tomorrow. He's on his way to the Oval Office for a showdown with Trump. We're going to get into all of that and much more. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Harry Cole Saves the West. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Lots of hidden gems there throughout the weekend that you won't want to miss. Now, tomorrow, ding, 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 seconds out, the Oval Office turns into the world's most exclusive boxing ring. On one side, Donald Trump, billionaire bruiser, master of the political knockout. And in the red corner, Zoran Mamdani, the socialist firebrand from Queens and the mayor-elect of New York City. Trump's already out swinging in the pre-match sledging, calling Mamdani a 100% communist lunatic. Quite hard to come back from that. And warning that New Yorkers have their zero chance of success in their city. Still with me is Freddie Hayward of the New Statesman and Republican strategist Sarah Selip. But first, let's speak to the host of the Tudor Dixon podcast, Tudor Dixon, former gubernatorial candidate. I can't remember where you stood though, but it's written in my notes, but it's not on the auto cue. I'm sorry about that. Welcome to Harry Cole Saves the West. Tudor, this is going to be a hell of a moment, right? It's going to be, two of the biggest names on the political sphere coming together. Last time we saw a sort of massive dust-up in the Oval Office, it was Zelensky and Trump back last February. Do you think we're going to see similar fireworks today, or is it going to be a sort of game respects game and could turn into a weird capitalist communist loving? I'm told it's Michigan.
Mamdani,
I'm sorry, it was Michigan. I knew it was in there somewhere.
Michigan, that's right, yes. I think Mamdani is very similar to Zelensky, actually. He's a failed actor. He is a failed rapper. He's never really held a job. He was a failed assemblyman. He never showed up for votes. So now he's kind of like the dog that caught the car. I think he doesn't really know what to do now. He came out and made this statement, my team reached out and set up this meeting. So are you not owning it? Are you not owning that you're going to visit the President of the United States, that the entire time you were running, you said you'd never deal with him, you'd never talk with him. Now he's going to go in, and it's going to be very interesting because here is a guy who says he can run the city of New York, going in to sit down with someone who's been very intimately involved in building the city of New York. Donald Trump is not going to be stumped by anything. He knows every law. He knows everything about public transit. He knows everything about building there. He knows everything about the police in New York City. He is going in, Mamdani is going in unprepared for who his opponent is. And he really is going in treating him as an opponent. He's not going in there as a team member. He doesn't want to build a coalition, but he's in a desperate situation because he desperately needs federal money. He's already begging people for money right now. He's begging them for $4 million for his transition team. He's like Gretchen Whitmer. Do you remember when Gretchen Whitmer went in with the folder over her face?
Yeah.
I think that's what we're going to see rather than Zelensky. I don't think Mamdani knows what he's getting into.
Do you think there's any movement for Donald Trump to withdraw his threat from providing federal funding to New York? The guy won, fairly comprehensively, just about scraped 50% of the vote. He was fair and squarely elected. Do you not think the president looks a little bit like, sour grapes if he continues to threaten to basically punish New Yorkers for the way they voted?
Donald Trump is a master at reading the other person in the room. It's very hard to sit down with Donald Trump and come out without him having analyzed you and figured out exactly how he's going to get what he wants. My dad used to call this type of negotiating rabbits and elephants. You want to make sure you give away your rabbits and keep your elephants. Donald Trump is a master at this. So whatever he decides, he's going to get exactly what he wants, and he's going to make sure New York has exactly what he wants New York to have. You know, he's a big talker. He wants to throw something out there when he wants to make a splash, but ultimately he makes sure that it is as safe and as protected as he can make it when he's trying not to allow a communist to really get any more of a foothold in the country. And to be honest, we have to prepare against these people. We've got this happening in Seattle. We've got this happening in New York. He's certainly not going to help him to achieve his plans of stealing from the people who have built that city. So I think that Donald Trump will be well prepared to make sure he gets exactly what he wants.
Doesn't this actually kind of work out quite nicely for both of these politicians? Donald Trump can basically anoint under the great gold dome that is now the Oval Office. He can basically anoint said communist, as you put it, as Caroline Levitt put it today, and as Trump put it himself, this communist leader. Look at the face of the New Democrats. They're so hard left. If you can sort of make him the poster boy, make him the poster boy of the left, and Mamdani gets what he wants as well. It's just a little bit of knockabout, a bit of boo-hoo. I went down to Washington and put on my skinny tie and stuck it to the man. They're both going to. This is theatre for both of them, isn't it?
Well, rarely does a Democrat walk out of the Oval Office feeling like they've gotten what they've wanted. I mean, Gretchen Whitmer was quite humiliated.
Chuck Schumer certainly didn't, because we walked out with a Trump 2028 hat last time he was in there, I think. But I mean, to Mamdani's base, a little dust up with Donald Trump doesn't do him any harm at all, does it?
No, I mean, if he goes in there and he tries to play the role of he's fighting, he's already behind the 8 ball, though. I mean, even the way he announced this, he didn't announce it as, I'm going in there to fight with him. Talk about a pathetic way of saying, well, my team set it up. I mean, this is not a leader. This is not somebody who's ready to go into the arena. You know from the way someone postures, from the way someone makes an announcement like this, whether or not they're going in there in a power position or they're going in there cowering. And he's literally saying, I had a girl in the back office who just happened to set this up for me. I've got no other choice but to head in.
I mean, for Donald Trump, though, on the other side, we'll leave Mamdani alone for now. I suspect he's going to get enough of a beating up without us sharpening our blows now. But for Trump, this does come at a tricky time, doesn't it? He kind of needs a bit of politics. You know, the Republicans had a bit of a rough old ride with their elections 2-3 weeks ago. Donald Trump's polling is not great, according to the latest poll in Fox last night. He had J.D. Vance out this morning calling for patience and calling for a bit of a truce in the MAGA wars. The sort of base, the movement that elected Donald Trump, he says 3 times, everyone else says twice, it is fragmenting now. And actually, he does kind of need some red meat and something to sort of bring his fans together, who seem to spend the entire time bickering about Israel or the price of eggs or the direction of American foreign policy, or whether they should be platforming Nazis on the Tucker Carlson show. It feels to me like this could be a reset moment for the president.
I think he loves the idea of having him come to the Oval Office. I do think he truly enjoys the art of negotiation. He enjoys showing that he has the ability to have these conversations. And ultimately, his goal, as you pointed out, is not to punish New York. He would gladly teach Mamdani what he doesn't know and prove to the world that he can take someone who has been flitting around and saying he's this great socialist and he's going to give everything out to everyone for free. He would gladly school him in front of the entire country and in front of the entire world and take the credit for it.
Stay there, Julia. I'm going to bring in our other guest, Freddie Hayward from the New Statesman, Sarah Selip, Republican strategist. Sarah, Donald Trump needs an easy win here, doesn't he? He needs a bit of red meat, as I was just saying to you there. He's going to have to take some swings of the bat, isn't he?
Right. So one of the things that I really like about this is that it's a preview for America 250, right? It's basically UFC with Trump in the ring. But that being said, whoever wrote this script, if it's you, good job. But called Trump the billionaire brawler, left out the fact that Mamdani is a billionaire Nepo baby who
I'm not sure he's quite a billionaire, is he?
His mom's apparently an Indian billionaire.
I think she was a successful film
Okay,
director.
I
But
cannot
I'll give you a
trust social.
I'll give you a Nepo baby then.
Okay, so Nepo baby. And this is just going to be really ironic because, you know, he's trying to be the next Letitia James as the mayor, where he doesn't have that much power, in all honesty. And this is honestly just going to be one big fundraising opportunity for him to be able to bankroll his staff coming into next year.
Freddie, let's take this a little highbrow now. Let's get into the political philosophy of all this. Donald Trump and Zoran Mamdani are two symptoms of the same problem, isn't it? It is people that feel that they're not getting what they want from the system. You know, the younger female, liberal educated people on the coasts have pivoted to the hard left, while actually people in poorer, less educated people in rural America have pivoted to the right, to Trump. But at the same time, it's basically two signs that the system isn't working, and people are actually looking for slightly things more outside the box, right? They've got so much to talk about.
Right, I'm not the arbiter of left-wing political philosophy, but I don't.
Well, you kind of are for tonight. For tonight, you are, I'm afraid.
He's a communist. I mean, he's in essence essentially a European social democratic municipal politician.
Here we go.
He has some very sort of minor policies that he wants to bring about, and there's clearly support for that in New York. I mean, on the Trump point, he definitely said during the campaign that he was going to engage with the president. He also said that he was going to focus on New York rather than engaging in this broader political battle with the office. So I don't think he will probably go into the Oval looking for some big theatrical victory, because as you said, that rarely happens for anyone but Donald Trump. But I mean, Harry, you're right. I mean, they both actually represent a similar type of politics. I was there at Zoran Mamdani's victory party, and I thought it was one of the best political.
Did you have to pay $13 for a beer? Nothing. I thought like everything was meant to be free under the communists.
It's New York, Harry. It's New York. It's the capital of capitalism. And they're similar communicators. These are the two politicians in America right now that have the most charisma. They're the ones that can speak to the moment. And remember, Trump might be the original populist, but we live in a populist age, and the left have their own too.
How useful is it for the Democrats, though, to have this guy who the president calls a communist? You dispute that. But it is obviously of the left to traditional Democrats. Barack Obama was probably the closest, most senior person that came close to endorsing him, but still stopped short of that. They spoke, but they didn't actually endorse. The sort of Democratic establishment have held him at arm's length. He's surrounded by some quite left-wing people. I don't think that's up for dispute. How damaging do you think it is for the Democrats outside of those coastal cities and liberal parts of the country to have their number one most successful elected politician right now being this guy?
Well, I think it's very good for them that they got a politician who engages with people. That's a different thing than saying that Democrats around the country should adopt his type of politics. They should probably adopt his mode of communication, but that doesn't mean that they advocate for the same things as he does. I mean, the Democratic Party and both parties in America are very dispersed. They're very decentralized in a way that isn't true in the UK. That allows them to have these different politicians, these different tribunes that can take their message to the electorate.
Tudor, I'm not sure if you're a betting woman or not, but do you think this ends in a Zelensky-style dust-up or some sort of weird loving? I'm starting to think it might just be a loving. There's something, my spider senses are tingling that this could be one of the weirdest political meetings going.
My spidey senses say that he is going to be patting him on. Donald Trump will be patting him on the back, maybe tap him on the head a little bit.
A lot of grip and grin, the power,
the
power hugs, the patting on the back. Sort of try, they are, but you said earlier, they are both New Yorkers. They both love New York in different ways. Could this be a strange bromance?
I do think that Donald Trump will embrace the New York attitude and talk to him about what New York needs, but I think that he is not naive in any way about who Mamdani is, and the fact that Mamdani, he's He's not a lifelong New Yorker. He's not even a lifelong United States of America. You know, he's not Donald Trump by any means. And I think, like I said, I think Donald Trump will be successfully schooling him and giving him an education on exactly how New York runs and exactly how the state of New York runs. I mean, he ran on things that he can't possibly do. And when you say that he's talking to people, let me push back a little bit on that, because he is only letting them hear what he has to say. I don't remember him going out on any podcasts or having long-form discussions or having long-form interviews. And when he did have interviews and he got asked about, well, you said this here and you changed your story there, he fumbled. He couldn't actually come up with any response to those questions. So, I mean, it's very similar to Kamala Harris from the standpoint of, if you don't have anybody actually talking back to you, then you can say whatever you want. But when you're asked questions and you can't answer, that's when the Democrats get caught up, and they just don't have somebody who's able to engage and have those ongoing conversations like that.
Sarah, what do you reckon? Is it gonna be fireworks? Is it gonna be must-watch TV? Is it gonna be box office, or is it gonna be, something slightly stranger?
I have no idea, but all I know is CNN is not going to be airing it.
Why not?
It's just going to get embarrassing for him. I mean, you never know what Trump is going to do. You know, Mamdani is going to use it as political propaganda, and I think Donald Trump might do something similar. Freddie, what's best case scenario for both of these people coming out of this?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it will matter that much. I mean, this is going to be an ongoing relationship throughout Zoran's mayoralty. He will want to build a relationship. He will want to protect the city from Trump's vengeance, as you put it, Harry, against the people of New York. I don't know. Let's see. We have no idea. We've not had that much briefing about it. We don't yet know the time. So let's see.
It does, yeah. It does seem to me that it feels quite fluid, and it might not actually. There was a sort of suggestion that actually that it wasn't quite as far over the line of agreed when Donald Trump, true to form, announced the meeting was happening on Truth Social. I think there may have been some details to hammer out. Judah, I mean, final question. Is this going to be the sort of next big relationship for politics? Are we going to be talking about this, as Freddie says, these two sort of characters as the respective leaders of their movements in the run-up to the midterms? Or will the Dems, do you think, try to wrestle away that sort of status as poster boy?
Democrats don't want this. They want to have that moderate wing of the Democrat Party come back, or they wouldn't have elected President Biden, who they thought was going to be the moderate. And you can see kind of, as you look into 28, you've got Gavin Newsom, and then you've got Gretchen Whitmer, and you've got all these, and Josh Shapiro, all kind of battling for that moderate. Newsom is the progressive, but you haven't seen this type of talk from the others. So I don't think they want him by any means to be the star of their party.
Judah Dixon, thank you for joining us. I'm sorry to cut you off there. We are going to have to go to break. Guys, you stay here. We'll be talking lots more to come after this. Sorry, can you apologize? Welcome back to Harry Cole Saves the West. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. You won't miss a thing. Still with me in DC is Sarah Selip, Republican strategist, and Freddie Hayward, the US correspondent of the New Statesman. Now, he's done it again. A firestorm has erupted today after Donald Trump publicly condemned 6 Democratic lawmakers who encouraged US troops to refuse unlawful orders. Now, the president has called that seditious behaviour and suggested they could face the death penalty. Obviously, that's caused an almighty stink. It came up this morning, this afternoon, I should even say, at the White House briefing, where instead of rowing back on it, Caroline Leavitt, the the president's press secretary, came out swinging.
This morning, President Trump accused 6 Democratic lawmakers of seditious behavior punishable by death. Just to be clear, does the president want to execute members of Congress?
No. Let's be clear about what the president is responding to, because many in this room want to talk about the president's response, but not what brought the president to responding in this way. You have sitting members of the United States Congress who conspired together to orchestrate a video message to members of the United States military, to active duty service members, to members of the national security apparatus, encouraging them to defy the president's lawful orders. The sanctity of our military rests on the chain of command. And if that chain of command is broken, it can lead to people getting killed. It can lead to chaos. And that's what these members of Congress who swore an oath to abide by the Constitution are essentially encouraging. We have 1.3 active duty service members in this country. And if they
Caroline Leavitt went on for some time on a similar point. Sarah said, 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19 even, if Donald Trump had tweeted or put on Truth Social that he suggested that congressmen should be, risked public execution for sedition, it would have been wall to wall for days. Just like when he called a female reporter Piggy on the plane on Sunday. You know, the sort of outrage machine would have, really kicked up. Yeah, there's been a bit of backlash to this comment today, but it feels to me that sort of everyone's slightly immune and sort of slightly numb to this stuff the president says now. Is that a good thing, or are we just so through the looking glass that he can basically say anything and everyone just kind of shrugs and goes, it's Donald Trump?
That's the problem. So let's actually take a step back from Donald Trump for a second, which is very hard to do because it's very
he is the
entertaining.
news vortex that is that we all dance around.
So to the viewers, if you haven't watched the video, go watch it because it is written by an overpaid, overworked Democratic staffer. That being said, we are in a time where there is so much violence and there's uproars every single day. You know, September 10th, when Charlie Kirk was murdered. This is the same exact violence that could come from these 6 congressmen deciding to say all of these terrible things, right? And we have to bring up one word, insurrection. Them calling for this unrest is very similar to...
Sort of, but then also Donald Trump suggesting that, he could consider capital punishment for elected politicians. That doesn't really take the temperature down after spending, rightly calling out violent rhetoric on the left.
Right, and I mean, the one thing when I was doing research about this that really surprised me, if it was really that big of a deal, if Trump really was on the nose, then there would be an active investigation into these 6 congressmen, right? When James Comey released the 8647 image on social media, there was
just to explain for our less read-in viewers, the 8646 is basically a sort of meme, that sort of coded meme that what is it? The death, calling for the death of Donald Trump in some fashion. How do the numbers work?
86, just death to 47, just calling out.
Fine. Yeah.
So there was an investigation within minutes, and Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, they were all over it. If it was really that serious, we should see that. But soldiers don't want to go to Leavenworth.
Yeah.
That is what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Freddie, he's kind of got a point. You can't really have congressmen saying, that arguing that military normal veterans and former CIA members who are now in Congress urging people not to follow orders.
I don't think that's what they said. They said that they shouldn't follow orders that are unlawful.
Which ones are they?
If they get orders that are unlawful, they were saying don't follow them.
But by putting it on the agenda, you're saying there is something that is unlawful already.
Well, I think that the administration hasn't been that keen and respectful of the rule of law in the past 9 months to put it in an understated manner. I don't think.
I mean, they've won in the. They haven't had anything really struck down permanently.
Well, so much of it is still going through the Supreme Court, so it's going to take a lot of time for.
But do you think they're justified in thinking that some of the orders that have been given are?
I can imagine that the primary concern is what's going on in the Caribbean right now with the strikes against the boats crossing the sea there.
On the numbness sort of point though, he's not beyond Teflon now, isn't it? It's like, he says something and there's a big row and Chuck Schumer and the Democrats line up and rush to the airwaves and CNN get very cross but actually, the next day,
I sort of disagree.
Next day it's gone.
Well, maybe the outrage is gone just because Trump is such a good politician, but the actual things that he's doing, the reality of his language and what he says he's going to do, he does. I mean, that's been the big difference about this term compared to the first term, is that he's able to do what he says. Therefore, I think actually we should take his words more seriously than we did during the first term.
Really? I mean, isn't this kind of show business now rather than actual action? Because, he hasn't really got a huge amount of time left. If he was to lose the midterms, he's going to be a pretty lame duck leader for 2 years. actually, his sort of ever-decreasing half-life is diminishing, and actually now the future of the Republicans and the future of the right is looking to the next generation.
Well, it's a threat, isn't it? It's essentially a threat from the president. To
Do you really think he's actually threatening to hang people?
Well, I don't know. It's essentially a way to intimidate people, right? To say, get back in line. And he's done this many times. And we've also seen him follow through on certain occasions. Do I think he's going to order the National Guard that is still walking around DC into the Capitol tomorrow? No, probably not. But I think it's a mistake to just constantly dismiss what he says.
So you hit a nail on the head right there. I don't agree with everything, but you hit a nail on the head. This goes back to the National Guard. So they are going wild and crazy putting out this video because they know they don't have the votes to actually create legislation and pass it to limit Trump's power. This is all about the National Guard being deployed to these, like we said before, cities of rebellion. The one that Newsom and J.B. Pritzker, they're just letting it happen while things are literally up in flames.
Talking of sedition and Congress and sending in the National Guard, Freddie, the Andrew, formerly known as Prince, Mr. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, has snubbed Congress. He has refused. He has missed the deadline to say whether he will come and testify in the Epstein cases. Fill us in on where we're at.
Right, so this was the Democrats on the Oversight Committee within the House. They said to Andrew, please come over and explain yourself and what you've done. They set a deadline. He's ignored that deadline. That was today or yesterday, certainly this week. He doesn't seem to want to engage, understandably, because this would be quite a shocking moment for a former member, I don't know whether he's still a member of the royal family, but to come to Congress. I mean, I spoke to Ro Khanna today, who's the congressman behind the Epstein bill, and he said that he thinks that Andrew will have to cave at some point.
Do they have any summoning power? Do they have any power?
As far as I'm aware, that they can't subpoena a foreign citizen.
I mean, given the payoffs and the ongoing investigations and probes into Epstein and his life, I mean, presumably he's quite risky to step foot in the United States at the best of times, let alone to testify to Congress for Andrew. Imagine he'll never be back in this country ever again.
No, and also I imagine the palace won't want him to do that. I mean, Keir Starmer's actually been vaguely open to the idea of this because he wants to distance himself from Andrew, but this would be a nightmare for the palace.
So it's 250 years since we had our little disagreement in awe. Was it time for America to throw some turnips again at the royals, or would you like to see Andrew dragged to the Hill to testify?
Exactly.
Yep.
I think we need to. James Comer is going to hit the nail on the head. We're going to make it happen. I mean, the Democrats don't want to make this a joke.
I will eat my hat if that man ever appears
I'll
in
take
Congress.
you up on that
I'm
bet.
afraid. Sarah Selip, Republican strategist, thank you as ever for joining us and on his debut. And what a debut it was. Freddie Hayward of the New Statesman. Guys, have a great weekend. That's it from us. I'm taking a week off. So subscribe on YouTube. There's more content there, but we'll see you after Thanksgiving. Happy holidays.